A brief, vivid scene. The Parathi Princess Embera stands alone on a lava-scorched cliff, her fingertips brushing a dying ember until it collapses into ash. She recalls her mother's face turning to dust the first time Embera tried to hold her. The three crimson suns of Parathi Prime cast long shadows across Emberhold's crystalline spires. Princess Embera watched as the last dying ember between her fingers crumbled to ash, scattering in the hot winds that perpetually swept across the volcanic landscape. 23 years of isolation had not dulled the pain of memory her mother's face. Beautiful and regal one moment, dissolving into dust the next when young Embera had reached out for comfort after her coronation. "Your Luminance," a voice called from behind her. "The Earth delegation approaches. The Council awaits your presence." Embera turned, her flame-like hair flickering with subdued emotion as she regarded Elliot, her royal aide. He stood at a careful distance, as everyone did. "How many this time?" she asked, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance typical of Pyrothi royalty. 5 representatives. Their lead envoy is named Ethan Ford. First diplomatic assignment. Elliot's eyes remained downcast as protocol demanded. "The Council has prepared the Grand Infernum Hall. Vorak expects you to attend, though you need not speak." Of course, the Council of Embers never permitted her to speak during official functions. What use was a princess who could not touch her subjects? The binding ritual that had marked her coronation had left her unable to fulfill the most fundamental duty of Pyrothi rulership, the right of touch, that bound sovereign to subject through physical connection. "My ceremonial robes," she said, moving toward her chambers carved from obsidian and living crystal. "And tell Vorak I will observe from the traditional distance." As Elliot hurried away, Embera gazed out across Emberhold's sprawling expanse, a city of basalt and bioluminescent crystal that pulsed with the heat of the planet's core. Somewhere beyond the plasma storms, Earth vessels carried delegates seeking alliance. They needed Parathi's plasma reactors for their terraforming projects. Her people needed Earth's bioengineered crops. And she needed something else, something beyond this cursed existence. Stormport Hangar vibrated with the arrival of the Earth shuttle. The craft emerged from plasma-charged clouds, its heat shields glowing orange against the backdrop of Parathi Prime's crimson skies. Inside the shuttle, Ethan Ford steadied himself against the bulkhead as the vessel completed its final approach. "Remember," Commander Hayes said beside him, her expression stern beneath her helmet's transparent visor. "Pyrothi biology operates at temperatures that would incinerate human tissue. The environmental suits are rated for their ambient heat, but physical contact is strictly prohibited. Any unauthorized touch is considered provocative." Ethan nodded, adjusting his diplomatic uniform beneath the protective outer layer. At 30, this marked his first major assignment, a potential landmark alliance between Earth and the Parathi. Everything in his training had prepared him for this moment. "What about their princess?" he asked. The briefing mentioned unusual protocols regarding her. Hayes frowned. "Embera is complicated. The Parathi are tactile by nature. Their rulers traditionally bond with subjects through ritual touch. But Embera cannot touch anything living without consequences. The Council governs in her stead." The shuttle doors slid open with a hiss, releasing a wave of scorching heat that made Ethan wince despite his suit's protection. The hangar before them gleamed with living crystal that seemed to pulse in response to their arrival. Guards with flame-like hair stood at attention, their amber eyes tracking the human visitors with cautious curiosity. Ambassador Ford, a tall Pyrothi, stepped forward, bowing slightly. "I am Vorak, leader of the Council of Embers. Welcome to Parathi Prime." Ethan returned the bow, carefully maintaining the prescribed distance. "Council Leader Vorak, Earth extends its gratitude for your hospitality. We come seeking friendship and mutual prosperity." "As do we." Vorek's voice resonated with the characteristic harmonic undertones of Pirathi speech. The grand infernum hall has been prepared. Her luminance, Princess Embera, will honor us with her presence. Ethan noticed a flicker of something displeasure, concern, cross Vorek's features as he mentioned the princess. The council leader quickly recovered, gesturing toward the corridor that led deeper into Emberhold. This way, Ambassador. Mind the temperature gradients. Your comfort has been considered, but our environments are designed for Pirathi physiology. As they proceeded through corridors of scorching heat and pulsing crystal, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at the alien beauty of Emberhold. Living architecture responded to their presence, corridors widening or narrowing, light intensity shifting as they moved. In the distance, he glimpsed gardens of crystalline formations and heat-loving organisms that defied Earth's biological classifications. The Grand Infernum Hall opened before them a vast chamber with a domed ceiling that captured and refracted the light of Parathi's three suns. The floor, a mosaic of cooling lava flows contained beneath transparent crystal, shifted continuously, creating patterns of mesmerizing complexity. Council members lined the chamber's perimeter, their flame hair undulating with barely contained energy. At the far end, on a floating crystal dais, stood a solitary figure. Even from a distance, Princess Embera commanded attention. Her ceremonial robes, woven from what appeared to be molten silk, cascaded around her slender form. Unlike the other Pyrothi, whose flame hair moved with animation, hers seemed oddly subdued, constrained as though deliberately dampened. Her expression, visible even across the chamber's expanse, carried a weight of resignation that struck Ethan immediately. Her luminance, Princess Embera of the Eternal Flame, sovereign of Parathi Prime, announced a court herald, voice echoing through the chamber. The assembled Pyrothi bowed, a synchronized wave of movement. Ethan and the Earth delegation followed suit. When he straightened, Ethan found himself the subject of the princess's distant gaze. Her amber eyes, luminous even across the hall's expanse, held his for a brief moment before shifting away. Vorak stepped forward, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. Human, you come seeking alliance. Touch lightly or perish. The formal greeting, Ethan had been briefed, was traditional, though its implications seemed particularly pointed given the circumstances. The ceremonial proceedings continued, with Vorak dominating the discourse. The princess remained silent, watching from her isolated position. Ethan noticed how the other council members rarely glanced in her direction, as though she were merely decorative a symbol, rather than a ruler. As the initial formalities concluded, a Parathi envoy approached the central space, bearing an ornate plasma-forged urn. The vessel glowed with internal heat, intricate patterns etched into its surface. A gift, Vorak announced, from the Das clan, offered in honor of our distinguished guests and her luminance. Protocol dictated that such gifts be presented to the sovereign. The envoy moved cautiously toward the princess's dais, extending the urn with obvious reverence. Embera hesitated, then stepped forward to receive it. The moment hung in the air. Ethan sensed the chamber's collective tension as the princess extended her hands. Her fingers grazed the urn's rim as she accepted it. For a heartbeat, everything seemed normal. Then catastrophe. The envoy's hand, the one that had briefly come too close to Embera's, suddenly ignited. Not with the controlled flame that characterized Pyrothi biology, but with a wild, consuming fire that raced up his arm. His scream cut through the hall's silence as his entire body combusted, collapsing into a pile of smoking ash in mere seconds. The urn melted in Embera's hands, molten metal dripping between her fingers, without causing her any apparent harm. Her face remained a mask of pain and resignation, amber eyes reflecting the horror that had unfolded before her. The court fell into stunned silence. Earth's delegation drew back instinctively. Vorik's expression shifted from shock to a carefully composed neutrality with practiced speed. "An unfortunate accident," the council leader intoned. The envoy approached too closely. "Her luminance's condition is regrettable." Ethan stared at the pile of ash that had, moments before, been a living being. His diplomatic training included crisis management, but nothing had prepared him for this. The princess stood motionless, droplets of cooling metal hardening around her feet, her expression unreadable, save for the profound sadness in her eyes. Without conscious thought, driven by a mixture of horror and unexpected compassion, Ethan stepped forward. Commander Hayes hissed a warning, but he continued, approaching the dais with measured steps. The Parathi court watched in collective shock as he moved toward their untouchable princess. When he reached the appropriate distance for formal greeting, Ethan bowed deeply. Then, with deliberate movement, he removed his protective glove and extended his bare hand. The gasps were audible. Embera's eyes widened, flicking between his face and his outstretched hand. The flame of her hair intensified momentarily with what appeared to be alarm. "Ambassador!" Vorik's voice cut through the tension. "You risk immolation. Step back immediately." Ethan held his position, his hand steady despite the oppressive heat radiating from the princess. "With respect, council leader, I offer greeting as equals." Embera hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and fear. Then, with exquisite slowness, she extended her own hand. The court collectively held its breath as their fingertips met. Nothing happened. No flame, no combustion, no reduction to ash. Their hands rested together briefly, and Ethan felt a sensation like returning to a hearth after a blizzard warmth that welcomed rather than threatened. The princess's flame hair calmed, settling into gentle waves around her shoulders as her amber eyes widened in disbelief. "He should be ash," someone whispered. Embera withdrew her hand slowly, studying her own fingers as though they belonged to someone else. Ethan remained standing, unharmed, his diplomatic training barely containing his own shock. Vorak recovered first, his voice carrying a hiss beneath its harmonics. "Remove him. This is an abomination." Guards moved forward, but hesitated, uncertain how to proceed given what they had witnessed. Ethan stepped back voluntarily, returning to the Earth delegation. Commander Hayes grabbed his arm, her expression promising severe consequences later. But Ethan's focus remained on Embera. In that brief contact, he had glimpsed something beyond the untouchable princess vulnerability, loneliness, and now, a spark of something that looked dangerously like hope. "The council will deliberate on today's events," Vorik announced, clearly struggling to regain control of the situation. "The Earth delegation will be escorted to their assigned quarters. Her luminance will retire." As Ethan was led away, he caught Embera's gaze once more across the diminishing space. Something had fundamentally changed in the universe of possibilities between them. Hours later, Ethan paced the confines of his assigned quarters, replaying the events in the Grand Infernum Hall. Commander Hayes had berated him thoroughly for breaking protocol, but even she couldn't deny the significance of his survival. "You could have been incinerated," she had said. "And then where would our alliance be?" A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The door slid open to reveal a Parathi Ethan hadn't met shorter than most, with intricately patterned flame hair that suggested significant age. "Ambassador Ford," the Parathi bowed slightly. "I am Elliot, royal aide to Her Luminance. She requests your presence, if you are willing." Commander Hayes, seated across the chamber, rose immediately. "Out of the question. After today's incident." "The invitation is for Ambassador Ford alone," Elliot interrupted, his tone respectful but firm. "Her Luminance rarely requests company. This is unprecedented." Ethan felt a strange certainty that he needed to accept. "I'll come," he said, ignoring Hayes's protest. Lead the way. Elliot guided him through corridors that seemed less traveled, narrower passages, where the crystal pulsed with subtler light. They ascended through what appeared to be residential sections of the palace, eventually reaching a corridor guarded by Parathi in distinctive obsidian armor. Her Luminance's private sanctuary, Elliot explained, as the guards permitted them passage. No council member has entered here in 23 years. The chamber beyond defied Ethan's expectations. Unlike the formal grandeur of the Infernum Hall, this space was intimate, a room carved from cooled obsidian, illuminated by clusters of bioluminescent fungi that cast a gentle blue glow. The temperature, while still uncomfortably warm for human standards, was noticeably cooler than other areas of the palace. Embera stood near a window that overlooked the volcanic landscape. She had exchanged her ceremonial robes for simpler attire, still made from heat-resistant materials, but lacking the ornate formality of court dress. Her flame hair moved more naturally here, away from the council's scrutiny. "Ambassador Ford," she turned as they entered, her voice softer than in the formal setting. "Thank you for coming." Ethan bowed. "Your Luminance. I'm honored by your invitation." "Elliot, leave us," she said. The aide hesitated, then bowed and withdrew. When they were alone, Embera gestured to a seating area formed from curved obsidian. "Please, be comfortable. The temperature here is maintained at the lowest level I can tolerate." Ethan sat, removing his helmet but keeping the rest of his environmental suit in place. "I apologize if my actions in the hall caused you difficulty." "Difficulty?" A sound escaped her that might have been laughter, though it carried little humor. "You're the first being I've touched in 23 years who didn't turn to ash. Difficulty doesn't begin to describe what you've caused." Her directness surprised him. "May I ask, what happened? The briefing materials mentioned your condition, but provided few details." Embera's flame hair dimmed slightly. "On my coronation day, 23 years ago, I was to receive the Crown of Embers, a ritual that binds monarch to realm through touch. My mother stood before me, ready to place her hands on mine as tradition dictates." She paused, pain evident in her expression. "When our skin met, she dissolved, turned to ash in seconds, like the envoy today." She moved to the window, staring out at the volcanic landscape. "Since then, I cannot touch any living thing. Plants wither, animals combust. Pyrothi. You saw what happens. The council claimed it was an unexpected manifestation of royal power that I simply needed to learn control. Years passed. The condition remained." "So the council rules in your stead," Ethan said, beginning to understand the political dynamics at play. "Vorak rules," she corrected. "The others follow. I am a figurehead, brought out for ceremonies to maintain the fiction of traditional succession. A monster who kills by touch, kept isolated for public safety." Ethan stood, moving closer despite his training screaming caution. "Yet I touched you, and here I stand, unharmed." Embera turned to face him, amber eyes studying him with naked curiosity. "Yes. Why is that, Ambassador Ford? What makes you different from every other living being on Parathi Prime?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I intend to find out. And I think we both know this changes everything." "Vorak will never allow investigation," she said, her voice hardening. "My isolation serves the council too well. An untouchable princess cannot claim the throne through the traditional right of touch. I cannot bond with my people, cannot truly rule." "Then, we don't ask Vorak's permission," Ethan said, surprising himself with his boldness. "I'm here as Earth's representative, but I'm also trained in tactical investigation. Let me help you." Embera regarded him with newfound intensity. "Why would you risk your mission for me? Your commander clearly disapproves." Ethan considered his answer carefully. "Because I believe in justice. Because no one should be imprisoned by a condition they didn't choose. And because He hesitated, then continued with honesty. Because when we touched, I felt something important. Something true. The princess's flame hair brightened, a physical manifestation of emotion she couldn't fully conceal. Very well, Ambassador. Where do we begin? First, he said with a slight smile, call me Ethan, and we begin with information specifically, historical records about your coronation, and this binding ritual. Embera's lips curved in what might have been her first genuine smile in decades. The archives, but they're restricted, monitored by council loyalists. Is there anyone in your court you trust? Someone with access who might help us? The princess considered. Perhaps. There is Jorik, once captain of my mother's guard. He serves in the archives now, relegated there after questioning Vorak too persistently after my mother's death. Then, Jorik is where we start, Ethan said. Can you arrange a meeting without the council's knowledge? Elliot can deliver a message. Jorik still maintains his oath to my bloodline, not to Vorak's council. Embera moved closer, her heat intensifying the already uncomfortable temperature around Ethan. But, understand this, if we're discovered, the consequences will be severe, for both of us. Ethan nodded, not backing away despite the heat. Some risks are worth taking. Your luminance. Embera, she corrected quietly. If we're conspiring together, formality seems somewhat redundant. The following day, under the pretense of cultural research for the alliance negotiations, Ethan made his way to the palace archives. The cavernous chamber housed millennia of Pyrothi history, ancient scrolls written in pyroglyphic script, crystalline data storage units, and holographic displays that shimmered with recorded events. Jorik awaited him, a grizzled Pyrothi, whose flame hair had dulled to embers, with deep-set amber eyes that missed nothing. His formal bow to Ethan carried none of the contempt often displayed by council loyalists. Ambassador, he said quietly, when they were alone among the stacks. Her luminance's message was most intriguing. You survived her touch. I did, Ethan confirmed, and we believe that fact might be significant. Jorik's ember hair flickered with suppressed emotion. More than significant. It could be revolutionary. He glanced around, ensuring they weren't observed. Follow me. Not all archives are available through the main catalog. The old guard led Ethan through narrowing corridors of historical texts until they reached a section sealed with crystalline barriers. Jorik placed his palm against the surface, which recognized his genetic signature and granted access. Restricted histories, he explained. Council members rarely visit, believing the contents fully cataloged and unremarkable. They are mistaken. Inside, Jorik retrieved an ancient scroll contained within a temperature-controlled case. This describes the traditional rite of touch in its original form, before the council's modifications. Ethan studied the pyroglyphic text, his translator implant struggling with the archaic dialect. Can you summarize? Jorik ran a finger above the text, careful not to damage the fragile material. The rite was originally a mutual exchange of thermal essence monarch and subject sharing flame without consumption. It was communion, not dominance. His ember hair dimmed. What Embera experienced at her coronation was not natural. The text speaks of similar cases only in instances of blood binding, forbidden magic that corrupts the natural flow of thermal energy. Blood binding? Ethan's tactical instincts sharpened. You believe someone deliberately sabotaged her coronation? Cursed her? I have suspected for 23 years, Jorik admitted. But suspicion without proof is merely sedition in Vorak's court. He pulled another document from a hidden compartment. This one, a crystalline tablet that glowed with stored data. This contains records of the coronation preparations, who was present, what materials were used in the ritual. As they studied the records, a pattern emerged. Council members, particularly Vorak, had insisted on handling specific aspects of the ceremony, traditionally left to royal attendants. the ceremonial oils, the crown of embers itself. The ritual words, all had passed through council hands before reaching Embera. "Look here." Jorik highlighted a passage. "The binding ritual includes a phrase not found in any historical record. By one whose hands should never touch flame. That's not traditional language." Ethan's mind raced with implications. If the council deliberately cursed Embera, they've committed treason. But why? What do they gain? "Power," Jorik said simply. "A princess who cannot touch, cannot rule. The council remains in control, with Vorak as its head. Meanwhile, foreign interests negotiate more favorable terms without a strong monarch to oppose them. Foreign interests, like Earth? No." Jorik shook his head. "The Centauri Consortium. They've secured exclusive plasma rights for decades at rates that impoverish our outer settlements. Vorak's personal wealth has grown, substantially." Ethan absorbed this, recognizing the familiar pattern of corruption that transcended planetary boundaries. "We need more evidence. Something concrete that links Vorak directly to the binding." "There is a holomatrix in the ancestral records section," Jorik said hesitantly. "It requires royal access, if Her Luminance were to visit the archives personally." "Too risky," Ethan immediately replied. "The council watches her closely. Is there another way?" Jorik considered. Perhaps. A drop of her blood would carry the genetic signature needed. The matrix responds to royal essence, not physical presence. Ethan nodded. "I'll speak with her. In the meantime, continue looking for anything related to this blood binding or the modified ritual. We need to understand exactly what was done to her if we hope to undo it." As Ethan turned to leave, Jorik caught his arm, a rare physical gesture for Perothi. "Ambassador." "Ethan, be cautious. Vorak has eyes everywhere. If he suspects you're helping Embera reclaim her power." "I understand the risks," Ethan assured him. "But some things are worth fighting for." Over the following days, Ethan balanced his official duties as Earth's envoy with clandestine research. Commander Hayes grew increasingly suspicious of his absences and apparent distraction during council meetings. "Whatever you're involved in, Ford, it ends now." She confronted him after a particularly tense negotiation session. "The alliance is delicate enough without your mysterious side projects. The council is already questioning your reliability." "The council is corrupt," Ethan replied in a hushed tone. "Hayes, they've deliberately incapacitated their rightful ruler. The princess is not our concern." Hayes cut him off. "Earth needs those plasma reactors for terraforming. Millions of lives depend on this alliance. Your fascination with the princess jeopardizes everything." Ethan felt the conflict acutely duty to Earth versus the injustice he was uncovering. What if there's a way to secure the alliance and help Embera? A legitimate ruler might offer better terms than Vorak's corrupt council. Hayes studied him with narrowed eyes. "You're in too deep, Ford. Don't make me report this to command." The warning was clear, but Ethan couldn't abandon what he'd started. That evening, he met Embera in her sanctuary again, updating her on their discoveries. "Blood binding," she whispered, flame hair flickering with restrained fury. "They used my mother's death as part of the ritual. Her royal essence, corrupted and turned against me. Jorik believes the holomatrix in the ancestral records might contain more specific information," Ethan explained, "but it requires royal blood for access." Without hesitation, Embera drew a ceremonial dagger from her robes. The blade glowed with heat as she pressed it against her palm, drawing a line of molten gold blood. "Take this to Jorik. Find the truth." Ethan. He accepted a crystal vial containing the luminous droplets, carefully securing it in his environmental suit. "If we can understand exactly how the binding was performed, we might find a way to break it." "And if we do?" Embera asked, her voice carrying an edge of dangerous hope. "If I could touch without killing?" "Then You claim your rightful place, Ethan said firmly. You become the ruler your people need. She studied him with those intense amber eyes. And what of Earth's alliance? Your commander believes I'm a distraction from your mission. Hayes sees only the immediate goal, Ethan said. I believe a just ruler of Parathi Prime would make a stronger ally than a corrupt council. Embera moved closer, the heat of her presence almost overwhelming. You risk much, Ethan Ford. So do you, he replied softly. For a moment, they stood in shared silence, the weight of their growing bond tangible between them. Then, Embera stepped back, composing herself. Go, find what we need. But beware, Vorak will have noticed your frequent visits to the archives by now. Ethan's return to the archives proved Embera right. He sensed surveillance immediately, guards positioned too casually, archive assistants who watched his movements with poorly disguised interest. Jorik met him with formal distance, clearly aware of the scrutiny. Ambassador, the old guard bowed stiffly. How may the archives assist you today? Ethan maintained the charade. I'm researching historical precedents for interplanetary trade agreements. Perhaps you could direct me to the relevant sections. As Jorik led him through the stacks, Ethan surreptitiously passed the vial of royal blood. The old guard concealed it instantly, his ember hair betraying no reaction. Return in 3 hours, Jorik murmured under his breath. I'll have what you seek. True to his word. When Ethan returned after an excruciating council meeting discussing plasma export quotas, Jorik had accessed the holomatrix. They met in a secluded viewing chamber, where the old guard activated a small projector. What I found confirms our worst suspicions, Jorik said gravely. Watch. The hologram flickered to life, showing a secret chamber beneath the grand infernum hall. Vorak stood within a circle of council members, holding a vial of molten gold blood unmistakably, the same substance Embera had provided. With royal essence and dark embers stoked, we bind her flame to ash, Vorak's voice intoned in the recording. Let no living thing withstand her touch until the rightful order is restored. The ritual continued, revealing the council members combining Embera's mother's blood with a substance provided by hooded figures identified in the recording's metadata as Centauri representatives. The spell, once completed, was integrated into the coronation ceremony. Treason, Jorik whispered as the recording ended. Undeniable evidence of deliberate sabotage of the royal succession. Ethan's mind raced with implications. We need to get this to Embera immediately. With proof of the council's treachery, she could rally supporters. It won't be that simple, Jorik cautioned. Vorak controls the military, the communications network. Even with evidence, challenging him directly would be dangerous. Before they could discuss further, alarms blared throughout the archives. Red light pulsed through the crystalline walls, and Jorik's expression shifted to alarm. We've been discovered, he said, quickly copying the holodata to a portable crystal. Take this to her luminance. I'll create a diversion. Jorik, no. I swore an oath to her bloodline, the old guard said firmly. Now go. There's a maintenance passage behind the historical linguistics section. It will lead you to the upper levels. Reluctantly, Ethan took the crystal and moved toward the exit. He had barely reached the indicated section when he heard commotion shouts, the distinctive sound of plasma weapons discharging. Jorik's diversion had clearly turned violent. Forcing himself forward, Ethan located the hidden passage and slipped inside, just as armored guards stormed the main archive chamber. The narrow tunnel, hot enough that his environmental suit's warning systems activated, wound upward through the palace infrastructure. When he finally emerged in an upper corridor, Ethan immediately sought a secure route to Embera's sanctuary. Palace activity had intensified. Guards moved with purpose. Communications echoed with urgent tones. Something major was happening. He had nearly reached Embera's quarters when Elliot intercepted him, the aide's flame hair flickering with agitation. Ambassador, they're looking for you. Vorik has accused you of espionage and theft of state secrets. I need to see Embera, Ethan insisted. I have evidence of the Council's treachery. Her luminance is already in danger, Elliot replied urgently. Vorik has called an emergency council session. He claims she has conspired with Earth to destabilize Parathi governance. Determined, Ethan pushed past the aide. Then there's no time to waste. He found Embera in her sanctuary, flame hair flaring with barely contained fury as she paced. She turned at his entrance, relief briefly crossing her features. Ethan, the council— I know, he interrupted, presenting the crystal containing the holodata. But we have proof, Embera. Undeniable evidence of what they did to you. She accepted the crystal, activating it to view a portion of its contents. As the images of Vorik's ritual played, her flame hair intensified until it resembled a corona around her head, heat radiating in palpable waves. They murdered my mother, she whispered, her voice harmonics shifting to dangerous frequencies. They bound my power with her blood, all so Vorik could sell our plasma to the highest bidder. We need to move quickly, Ethan urged. Vorik has already begun to move against us. Jorik, he hesitated, the memory of the commotion in the archives still fresh. Jorik created a diversion so I could escape with this evidence. I don't know if he survived. Embera's expression hardened. Loyal to the end. His sacrifice will not be in vain. She moved to a concealed panel in her sanctuary wall, revealing a hidden compartment containing a ceremonial staff crowned with crystalline formations. This belonged to my mother. It's time I reclaimed more than just her memory. A sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Elliot entered without waiting for permission, his usual composure shattered. Your luminance. Vorik has issued a decree. You've been declared rogue, conspiring with the human envoy against Parathi interests. Guards are coming to place you under protective custody. How long do we have? Ethan asked. Minutes at most, Elliot replied. They're securing the upper levels now. Embera moved with sudden decisiveness. Elliot, you've served me faithfully. Now I must ask for one final service. Delay them as long as you can. The aide bowed deeply. It has been my honor. Your luminance. As Elliot departed, Embera turned to Ethan. There's another way out. The thermal vents beneath the palace connect to ancient tunnel systems. My mother showed me the access points when I was a child. She moved to what appeared to be a decorative heat vent in the floor, pressing her palm against specific points in sequence. The crystalline structure reconfigured, revealing a narrow passage downward. Where will it lead us? Ethan asked, checking his suit's environmental systems. The readings already showed dangerous heat levels. To the old city, the Hall of Eternal Embers, Embera explained, gathering a few essential items. And perhaps to answers. There's someone there who might help us break the binding. Ethan hesitated only briefly. Commander Hayes will consider this final proof that I've abandoned my mission. And have you? Embera asked, her amber eyes searching his. He thought of Earth's needs, of the Alliance's importance, of his duty as a diplomat. Then he looked at Embera, a rightful ruler denied her heritage through treachery and corruption. I'm pursuing justice, he said finally. That aligns with Earth's true interests, even if Hayes can't see it yet. Embera nodded, satisfied. Then let's go. The tunnels will be dangerous. They channel magma flow from the planet's core. Stay close. Together, they descended into the passage, which quickly opened into broader tunnels of basalt and crystal. Heat intensified dramatically, making Ethan grateful for his environmental suit. Even with its protection, sweat poured down his face as they navigated the thermal vents caverns. The tunnels pulsed with planetary energy conduits of magma flow, visible through transparent crystal sections, their orange glow providing inconsistent illumination. Embera moved with surprising confidence, her flame hair now serving as additional light in darker sections. My ancestors built these passages, she explained, as they descended deeper. The Pyrothi once lived in closer harmony with the planet's core energies. Before colonization, before the Council's predecessors established the current governance structure. Your people were different then? Ethan asked, fascinated despite their precarious situation. More elemental, she replied. Less bound to physical form. The histories speak of ancestors who could transition between flesh and pure thermal energy at will. Her expression grew distant. Some believe that ability still lies dormant in royal bloodlines. Their progress slowed as they navigated particularly narrow sections, where magma pulses caused the tunnel walls to deform periodically. Ethan's suit warnings became more persistent as temperatures approached its maximum tolerance. How much further? He asked, monitoring his depleting cooling resources. Before Embera could answer, plasma bolts struck the tunnel wall beside them, sending crystalline fragments flying. Behind them, the distinctive silhouettes of Pyrothi mercenaries appeared. Katha's squad, easily recognizable by their specialized armor. Run! Embera commanded, pulling Ethan forward as more plasma bolts illuminated the tunnel. They sprinted through a series of connecting passages, the pursuing guards close behind, at a junction where multiple tunnels converged. Ethan made a split-second decision, kicking over a support column of molten glass. The structure collapsed, temporarily blocking their pursuers. This way, Embera directed, turning into a narrower passage that sloped steeply downward. The heat intensified further, forcing Ethan to activate his suit's emergency cooling reserves. A final plasma bolt from the mercenaries struck near Embera. In response, she raised her hand and, with visible concentration, channeled the ambient heat into a blinding flash of light. The pursuing guards fell back, momentarily disoriented. I didn't know you could do that, Ethan remarked as they continued their escape. Neither did I, she admitted. My abilities have been suppressed, but something is changing. She glanced at her hands, which now emitted a subtle glow. Being away from the Council's influence. Perhaps. They continued downward for what felt like hours, the tunnels gradually widening into larger caverns, where ancient structures became visible remnants of Pyrothi civilization, predating Emberhold's construction. Finally, they emerged into a vast underground space unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The Hall of Eternal Embers stretched before them, ruins of a pre-colonization Pyrothi city, carved directly into the living rock. Massive columns of crystalline material supported vaulted ceilings, adorned with luminous mineral formations. Unlike Emberhold's carefully controlled environments, this place pulsed with raw planetary energy, heat shimmering in visible waves. It's beautiful, Ethan breathed, his translator implant struggling to find appropriate descriptors. It's home, Embera replied softly. My ancestral home, before the Council, before the binding. They moved through the ancient city, passing structures whose purpose Ethan could only guess at. The architecture seemed designed to channel and amplify thermal energy, rather than simply contain it, suggesting a civilization that embraced heat as a resource rather than a hazard. Who are we seeking? Ethan asked, as they approached what appeared to be a central plaza. Seraphine, Embera explained. An exiled mystic who refused to acknowledge the Council's authority. My mother spoke of her, said she preserved knowledge from before the current regime. If anyone knows how to break a blood binding, it would be her. The plaza opened into an unexpected sight, gardens of bioluminescent fungi that thrived in the intense heat, creating patterns of ethereal beauty across the ancient stonework. Among them moved a figure whose flame hair had evolved into something extraordinary, more like a living crown of pure energy than the controlled flames of typical Pyrothi. Princess Embera, the figure spoke without turning. I've been expecting you, though not for 23 years. Seraphine turned to face them, revealing features that appeared both ancient and timeless, her skin translucent in places, as though the boundary between flesh and flame had begun to dissolve. Her amber eyes held knowledge that seemed to pierce directly through Ethan's protective barriers. "And you've brought a human," she continued, studying Ethan with evident curiosity. "One whose touch doesn't turn to ash. Fascinating." "You know about my condition?" Embera asked, stepping forward. "I know about the binding ritual," Seraphine corrected. "I warned your mother that the council could not be trusted with the coronation preparations. She believed tradition would protect you." The mystic's expression softened. "She was wrong." "Can you help us break it?" Ethan asked directly. "We have evidence of how it was performed." Seraphine gestured for them to follow her deeper into the gardens. Breaking such a binding is possible, but costly. Blood magic tied to royal essence is among the most powerful forms of thermal manipulation. It has bound not just your ability to touch, Embera, but your connection to your ancestral heritage. They reached what appeared to be Seraphine's dwelling, a structure that harmonized with the surrounding gardens, where the distinction between architecture and organism blurred. Inside, crystalline formations functioned as both furniture and technology, responding to the mystic's presence. "Show me what you've discovered," she requested. Embera presented the hollow crystal, containing the evidence from the archives. Seraphine studied the recorded ritual with grave attention, her flame crown intensifying as she absorbed the details. "As I suspected," she finally said. "They combined your mother's royal essence with corrupted embers, thermal energy deliberately tainted by foreign technology. The Centauri contribution was crucial. Their quantum stabilizers prevented the binding from killing you outright, instead redirecting your natural thermal exchange into destructive potential." "Can it be undone?" Embera pressed. Seraphine activated another crystal, projecting images of ancient Pirothi. These beings appeared more elemental than modern Pirothi, their forms shifting between solid and energy states with fluid grace. "Your ancestors once transcended the duality of flesh and flame," the mystic explained. "They existed as thermal entities who could manifest physical form when needed, but were not bound by its limitations. This ability, thermal transcendence, has been systematically suppressed by successive regimes, relegated to myth." The projection shifted to show royal lineage markers, genetic patterns that glowed with distinctive energy signatures. "The binding ritual not only cursed your touch, but prevented you from accessing your ancestral ability to transcend. It keeps you locked in an unstable state, neither fully flesh nor fully flame." Ethan studied the projections, his tactical mind connecting implications. So, breaking the binding wouldn't just allow Embera to touch without killing it, would potentially unlock this transcendent ability? "Precisely," Seraphine confirmed, "which is why the Council feared her so deeply. A ruler with full access to thermal transcendence could not be controlled or manipulated. They bound her to prevent the emergence of a truly sovereign power." Embera absorbed this revelation, her flame hair responding with subtle intensity shifts. "How do we break it? What must I do?" Seraphine's expression grew solemn. "You must channel planetary core energy through your bloodline. The ritual requires accessing the primordial altar, a crystalline spire at the center of the ancient city that connects directly to Parathi's core. There, you must reclaim what was taken through an invocation of your complete lineage." "That sounds potentially fatal," Ethan observed with concern. "It is," the mystic acknowledged bluntly. "The process could kill you, Embera. The binding will fight back the corrupted energy, will attempt to consume you, rather than release you. You must be strong enough to channel the core energy, without combusting." Embera showed no hesitation. "Teach me. Whatever preparation is required, I'll undertake it." For 3 days, they remained in the Hall of Eternal Embers. Seraphine instructed Embera in ancient thermal manipulation techniques, teaching her to summon and direct her flame in controlled bursts. Each session pushed Embera closer to her limits, risking self-immolation as she struggled to master energies long suppressed by the binding. "Ethan, meanwhile, underwent his own form of training. The deeper they ventured into the ancient city's magma fissures, the more intense the heat became. Yet his immunity, whatever its source, seemed to strengthen rather than diminish. Under Seraphine's guidance, he learned to withstand temperatures that should have been immediately fatal to humans. His connection to Embera somehow enhancing his resilience. During breaks in their training, Seraphine shared what information she had gathered from her network of contacts in Emberhold. Vorak had broadcast a falsified holovirus throughout Parathi Prime, claiming Embera had kidnapped the human envoy and fled with state secrets. Some citizens believed the propaganda. Others remembered her father's benevolent rule and questioned the council's narrative. "Jorik?" Ethan asked on the third day, still haunted by the guard's sacrifice. Seraphine's flame crown dimmed slightly. "Captured, but alive. Vorak keeps him as leverage, believing he knows your location." On the fourth morning, as they prepared for the ritual, disaster struck. The distinctive sound of Pyrothi mercenaries echoed through the outer chambers of the ancient city. Seraphine's expression shifted to alarm. "We've been betrayed," she said, moving quickly to secure the hollow crystals containing their research. "How?" Ethan asked, activating his suit's tactical systems. "No one knew our location except—" "Marilla," Embera whispered, pain evident in her voice. "My childhood friend. She must have tracked us through our thermal signature." Seraphine confirmed with a grim nod. "The council offered her safety in exchange for your location. Fear is a powerful motivator, Princess. Not everyone has your courage." The mystic led them through hidden passages toward the city's core as sounds of pursuit grew louder. "We must reach the primordial altar immediately. Once the ritual begins, the core energies will provide some protection." They emerged into a vast chamber, unlike any they had yet encountered, a magma chamber with a ceiling that dripped molten droplets. Its floor, a complex mosaic of crystalline structures that channeled flowing lava in precise patterns. At the chamber's center stood the primordial altar, a crystalline spire that rose from floor to ceiling, with intricate channels that pulsed with planetary heat. As they approached, ancient runes inscribed in the surrounding stonework began to glow in response to Embera's presence. The princess moved forward with newfound confidence, her training with Seraphine evident in her controlled movements. "The ritual must begin now," the mystic instructed urgently. "I hear them approaching. I will hold them as long as possible." Seraphine, Embera began, but the elder Pyrothi cut her off. "My path ends here. Princess, yours continues beyond. Now hurry, the alignment won't last." With reluctance, Embera moved toward the altar. Ethan followed, positioning himself nearby as Seraphine had instructed, close enough to intervene if necessary, but not so close as to disrupt the energetic patterns. Embera removed her ceremonial outer robes, revealing simpler attire beneath. Her arms, now bare, showed faint luminous patterns beneath the skin, royal lineage markers becoming more prominent as she approached the altar. When she touched the crystal spire, her entire body shimmered skin, turning translucent as flame swirled beneath, seeking expression. She began the incantation Seraphine had taught her, an ancient chant in the lost Pyrothi tongue that called upon her complete lineage, naming ancestors whose existence had been struck from official records. As her voice echoed through the chamber, the magma currents beneath the crystalline floor responded, shifting to align with her words. The altar's channels filled with intensified energy, conducting planetary core heat directly into Embera's form. Behind them, the sounds of conflict erupted. Seraphine confronting Katha's mercenaries at the chamber entrance. Plasma weapons discharged, their distinctive whine cutting through Embera's chant. The binding fought back violently. The altar's channels distorted, sending waves of destructive pyro energy through Embera's body. She convulsed, burning from within as the corrupted magic resisted her attempt to break free. Lava cracks appeared in the floor beneath her feet, threatening structural collapse. Ethan moved closer, alarmed by her obvious pain. "Embera!" "Stay back," she gasped between spasms. "I must complete." The chamber entrance exploded inward. Seraphine fell, wounded, but still fighting as Vorik's mercenaries poured in, weapons raised. Behind them appeared a holographic projection of Vorik himself, his expression a mixture of fury and fear. "Stop this abomination!" the council leader commanded. "Katha, end this now!" The mercenary captain raised her weapon, targeting Embera directly. Ethan moved without thinking, placing himself between them, his immunity to heat nothing against plasma bolts. At that moment, Embera reached the ritual's critical juncture. The binding magic, sensing its imminent dissolution, threatened to combust her soul entirely. She faced the ultimate choice: surrender to the binding and remain powerless, losing her chance to claim the throne, or risk total dissolution by fully embracing her heritage. With a surge of will that resonated through the chamber, Embera channeled every ounce of her infinite ember heritage into breaking the corrupted bonds. The crystal altar fractured beneath her hands, releasing a blinding wave of controlled heat that swept through the chamber. Katha's mercenaries fired, but their weapons collapsed in the intense heat, components melting before they could discharge. The magma currents beneath the floor realigned, forming a protective barrier around Ethan and Embera as the binding shattered with an audible crystalline scream. Vorak's holographic face contorted with disbelief. "Impossible! The binding was perfect!" "No magic is perfect," Embera replied. Her voice transformed the harmonic resonance now carrying power that vibrated through the chamber's structure. Especially magic built on betrayal. She rose from the altar, transformed. No longer simply a Parothi princess. Embera had become a true thermal sovereign, flesh and flame, merging into a transcendent state. Her eyes burned like twin suns, her presence instantly suppressing the binding's residual energy. The magma chamber's bioluminescent fungi bloomed in response, casting ethereal light that symbolized rebirth. Vorak's holographic form flickered as Embera gestured, his connection severed remotely by her new abilities. Katha and her mercenaries fell to their knees, weapons useless, facing a power they could neither fight nor comprehend. Ethan stared in awe at Embera's transfigured form. She turned to him, her expression both familiar and newly majestic. When she spoke, her voice carried both authority and warmth. "It seems we have a council to confront," she said, extending her hand. "Will you stand with me, Ambassador Ford?" He took her offered hand without hesitation. The heat that flowed between them now felt like a communion rather than a threat, a sharing of essence that reinforced their bond. "Always, your luminance," he replied with a smile. Together, they approached Seraphine, who lay wounded near the chamber entrance. The mystic looked up at Embera with satisfaction, her flame crown dimming as life ebbed. "The flame of truth," she whispered. "You've reclaimed it. Use it wisely, child." "Come with us," Embera urged, kneeling beside her mentor. "Help me rebuild what was lost." Seraphine shook her head gently. "My journey ends here. Yours begins anew." With a final smile, the mystic's physical form dissolved, her flame crown expanding briefly before merging with the chamber's ambient energy, a final transcendence. Embera rose, determination replacing grief. "We honor her by continuing forward." She turned to Katha, who remained kneeling. "You have a choice, Captain. Continue serving a corrupt council, or help restore Parathi's true heritage." Katha looked up, meeting Embera's radiant gaze. "The evidence from the archives? Was it real?" See for yourself," Embera replied, projecting the holodata showing Vorak's treachery. As the images played, showing the Council's conspiracy with the Centauri Consortium. Katha's flame hair flickered with dawning understanding. "I serve Parathi Prime," the captain finally said, bowing her head. "Command me, Sovereign." With Katha's forces now under her authority, Embera created a new path upward, using her newly awakened abilities. She opened a geothermal lift, a shaft of controlled energy, that would carry them directly to the palace. As they ascended, Ethan contacted Commander Hayes, explaining the situation in terms the tactical officer would understand. The rightful ruler of Parathi Prime has reclaimed her position, he reported. The Council's corruption has been exposed. This represents an opportunity for Earth to establish an alliance with legitimate authority rather than conspirators. Hayes's response was predictably skeptical, but pragmatic. Assuming you're not delusional, Ford, what exactly do you propose? Bring Ambassador Cross and the full delegation to the Grand Infernum Hall, Ethan instructed. You'll witness the transition of power firsthand. And Hayes, bring the original alliance proposal, not Vorak's modified version. When they emerged in Emberhold, palace inhabitants watched in awe as Embera ascended through corridors of living crystal, ash and flame swirling in ritual submission around her transcendent form. Word spread rapidly through the city. The princess had returned, changed, powerful, free of the curse that had isolated her for decades. The council was swiftly corralled. Vorak's authority, collapsing as evidence of his treachery, was broadcast throughout Parathi Prime. Broken chains of binding physical manifestations of the shattered curse lay scattered at the conspirators' feet as they faced their rightful sovereign. 3 days later, a public coronation took place in Skyforge Plaza, bathed in the tri-solar sunset. Embera stood on a dais of living crystal, her transcendent form resplendent in ceremonial robes that shifted between solid matter and pure energy. Ethan stood beside her in ceremonial human robes, officially recognized as Consort of the Flame, a title hastily created to acknowledge his unique position. People of Parathi Prime, Embera addressed her subjects directly, for the first time in 23 years. Her voice resonated through thermonic amplifiers, reaching every corner of Emberhold. For too long, you have been told that your princess was cursed, dangerous, unfit to rule. Today, you see the truth that binding was a lie, imposed to prevent unity under true sovereignty. She gestured to the assembled council members. Now, under guard, those who betrayed your trust will face justice, not vengeance, but restoration. They will serve Parathi in ways that heal rather than harm. The populace responded with a collective roar of approval, volcanic tremors echoing their acceptance of their transformed ruler. Embera continued, outlining her vision for a renewed Parathi society, one that honored ancient traditions while embracing beneficial innovations, including fair alliance terms with Earth and other worlds. In the days that followed, the governance structure underwent radical reformation. Vorak and his closest conspirators were given the choice of exile or public service under Embera's new mandate of restorative justice. Most chose the latter, recognizing that her approach offered redemption rather than mere punishment. Ambassador Cross and Earth's full delegation returned to renegotiate alliance terms. With Embera now in power, the partnership evolved into something more equitable: plasma reactors, provided in exchange for humanitarian aid and cultural exchange programs that would benefit both worlds. Jorik, released from captivity, was honored for his loyalty and appointed royal historian, tasked with recovering suppressed knowledge about Parathi heritage. Even Marilla, whose betrayal had nearly cost them everything, was eventually given a path to redemption, assigned to work in the outer settlements, helping those most harmed by the Council's exploitative policies. Months later, Embera and Ethan strolled through the newly established Ember Gardens, a terraced oasis where hybrid earth flora thrived alongside Pyrothi thermal plants. Their first child, a human Pyrothi hybrid whose existence had once seemed impossible, rested in Embera's arms, cradled safely in flames that no longer harmed. She used to touch only ash, Ethan observed quietly. Now she holds life itself. Embera smiled. the warmth between them a living testament to their shared future. The binding twisted natural connection into destruction. Breaking it restored the truth that flame can nurture as well as consume. From a distance, they observed diplomatic vessels arriving from neighboring systems, the Argonian Republic, and even the Centauri Consortium. Now forced to negotiate with a sovereign, they could neither deceive nor intimidate. The political landscape of their sector was changing rapidly as news spread of Parathi Prime's transformed rulership. "They're watching," Ethan noted, indicating the distant ships, "wondering what a united Parathi means for the balance of power." "Let them wonder," Embera replied, her transcendent form glowing with gentle intensity in the fading light of the three suns. The flame of truth spreads at its own pace. As night fell over Emberhold, illumination came not from artificial sources, but from the city itself, living crystal, responding to the presence of its sovereign. A ruler in harmony with both heritage and innovation. In the palace nursery, their child slept peacefully, tiny fingers occasionally emitting soft sparks that spoke of a unique dual nature. The final ember of sunset lingered on the horizon, refusing to diminish entirely, a fitting symbol for a flame that, once ignited, would continue to spread its light across the galaxy.